What is up, everybody? I hope everybody's having a fantastic evening. But if you are watching, your evening is about to get better because Marco and I have some fun topics to go over. John Lynch joined Pat McAfee. That was an interesting interview. We're going to talk all about that. We're going to talk a little bit of Adam Peters. I got to ask Marco, and I talked about this on Tuesday, but I do have to ask Marco what his thoughts are and if he saw anything different in this year's draft without Adam Peters. And then we're going to do a top 10 NFL team power rankings after the draft edition, how we see it. Where do the 49ers fit in? We're going to do all of that plus more next. All right, welcome back to Last Second Sports, where we are giving you our take down to the last second. As you can see, I got my guy Marco with me. Marco, what's up, my man?
What's up, Jesse? How's it going, man?
Really good, man. Really good. Couldn't be better. You know, on a personal note, I was unable to do the show last night with Grant remodeling one of our bathrooms, and it's just like been dragging on. You get to the very end, and there's so many like little things that have to be buttoned up before it's just finished. And I had to get those things buttoned up last night. So took last night off, unfortunately, but am back tonight with you, man, ready to discuss the San Francisco 49ers. How you doing?
I'm doing good, man. It's gonna be cool once you have the finished product, man. My in-laws they remodeled a bathroom, and it was pretty cool to see the before, the demolition, and then the after. Like, you're gonna love the after. It's definitely worth it, man.
You know what, though? Here's the other thing. So this house, we bought it about 5 years ago when we moved to Florida, and it was built like 2006, I think. You also start to notice, like, when you start tearing things apart, how chintzy everything is. I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
they had like tile directly on drywall, and now luckily there's no water damage or anything underneath. It held up really well. Whatever they used to hold the tiles on worked really well, but ultimately just it wasn't done right. It wasn't waterproof the right way. So we're going in on the back end, doing it the right way, making sure everything is good and future proof. But yeah, it's a lot of fun, man. It is a lot of fun seeing a project go from beginning to end. One down, two to go. So it'll be a lot of fun.
definitely sounds like your house was built by people in Florida, brother.
Hey, it's all on cylinder blocks, however they do it. So, anyways, all right, man. Listen, John Lynch today was on with Pat McAfee, and he had a good half an hour interview. To me, a lot of it was fluff. They were kind of building into it, but there were some interesting things that came from that interview. Why don't you talk me through a couple of the things that you found interesting with the John Lynch interview and Pat McAfee?
I mean, I did hear a lot of fluff from him, so I went back to watch
Yeah.
it just to see what he was having to say. And John's the ultimate know how to get around a question kind of guy. Like, he knows how to just talk someone's ear off, and you're like, "Oh,
Hey,
that
can
was
I tell you
great."
what I call that? This is what I call this in the corporate world. It's called the leadership circle, where you
Oh,
ask a
absolutely.
question and they talk, and they get right back at the beginning and they didn't answer your question.
And that's exactly what he does. Like, John Lynch is the ultimate corporate world kind of guy. Like, that's why the Niners hired him as a GM in a way. That's what Kyle wanted out of a guy. And a lot of the questions, like, bro, just shut up and answer the question. Like, and I actually got great insight when he actually asked who deserves credit in the organization for drafting Brock Purdy. And I thought this was the most intriguing answer that we've gotten from a Kyle
Mm.
Shanahan, John Lynch answer in terms of who scouted Brock. So he gave credit to two people. He said the most important credit goes to Steve Slowick and Brian Greasy, and he mentioned that they were the two dudes who were extremely high on him. And Slowick, which is Bobby Slowick's brother, was like, you know what, this guy pounding the table for him. He changed the culture at Iowa State, XYZ. And then Brian Greasy was like, hey, no, his film really does match it. So it's like, for me, it's when you have people pounding the table for a guy, it still shocks me that he went last in the NFL in the draft. Like, if your top scouts and your coaching staff is pounding the table for him, why'd you wait so long to take this guy with the last pick in the draft? Like, that just tells me like looking into Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch's minds, what they truly thought of Brock Purdy, because they had high execs and coaches pounding the table for this guy. It's kind of interesting.
It is really interesting. And I remember I had a third round grade on Brock Purdy. But when I started doing mocks, because the way that I see it is there's always a few prospects here or there that I like just from watching in the season. And I'd actually liked Brock Purdy the year prior. So I had a third round grade on him. So when I started doing mocks, I was shocked that he just kept falling to the last pick. I was like, okay, I guess I'll just keep mocking Brock Purdy to the 49ers, the last pick overall. There's no way he's going to fall that far, right? And sure enough, man, he just kept falling and falling and falling. And they got him at the last pick. But the fact that some of those guys were pounding the table for him tells you that they didn't see him as the final pick in the draft either. They probably thought he could have gone or should have gone a lot higher. But it's also interesting because not only do you have a little bit of difference of opinion within the organization, but also across the league. I mean, you see Ricky Pearsall is a great example. If the 49ers don't take Pearsall with 31, he might make it all the way back to him at 63. You never know with the way that other people see it, right? But the 49ers saw him as a first round value. And when you look at their first round value versus another team, they may have it completely different. So either way, man, they ended up getting Brock Purdy, but it was interesting hearing exactly who was in on Brock Purdy and who wasn't. We had heard some rumors, but now we know for a fact. The other thing that I found really interesting in this interview is he talked about the wide receiver room and how ultimately they weren't willing to move on from anybody that did take calls, but they like the wide receiver room as it is for this year. But he also talked about finding a way that they have some built-in stopgaps to get the rookies involved in the receiver room. And I mean, you can say that, but here's the numbers, Marco. You tell me what you think of this. So when you don't have, if you remove the numbers from Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, and George Kittle, your main guys that catch the football, this includes Juwan Jennings, by the way, there was only 69 total catches that went to everybody else on the team. 19 of those went to Juwan Jennings. And we also can't forget that 28 of those were in week 18 because none of those guys played. So really, the course of the season, you're talking about 51 catches. So assuming that those guys get the same amount of catches, if you throw roughly the same amount, where do the touches come in for these rookie wide receivers? I don't understand it.
And that was something I took away too, because he's like, oh, we have a plan. So my guess is the plan, maybe throw the ball more. I mean, maybe that Kyle Shanahan has finally realized, you know what? My offense is a little Stone Age in a way, even though it's like about 60-40 run pass. We're the last team in the NFL to throw the ball. Maybe he understands, you know what? I need to trust Brock more. I need to truly let Brock Purdy throw the ball. And that's how you get these guys targets, because 51 targets, like you said, is not a lot. Reality is you want your number one draft pick, Ricky Pearsall, to get 51 targets at least in a season, like especially year one when he's 24 years old. So for me, and when I say Stone Age, I know that's going to be taken out of context. I just know for a fact. So what I mean by that is when you're Kyle Shanahan's offense, he's older in the sense of it's a run first offense, and in the league, it's right now it's passive. If you want to win Super Bowls, you got to throw the ball. You have to have that quarterback that could put the weight on his shoulders in crucial situations and truly win you games by throwing the ball more. Now, do they trust Brock to do that? I don't know, but that's the only way you could operate in getting guys like Ricky Pearsall and Jacob Cowing touches this year. I don't know if that's Kyle's plan, but 51 targets to go around, and like you said, 18 or 19 of those catches were to Jennings. That means that puts you at 40 or 30 roughly. And I don't see Pearsall or Cowings just completely taking over the Juwan Jennings role or the Deebo Samuel role, where they're going to get heavy targets.
Yeah, I don't either. I mean, one thing he said, like before he went into that, he did preface, hey, sometimes you've really got to build for the future while also trying to take care of the current. And then he talked about how they have roles for those guys. I think that the way that I saw that was roles could be anything. I mean, maybe that's punt returns, maybe that's kick returns. That's how you get them involved there. Jawan Jennings, I wanted to add this comment here. Dumpster Fire says you just proved that they didn't have wide receiver depth, Jesse, and that's why they added some. Yeah, but Jawan Jennings is pretty good, is he not? He only had 19 catches last year. So it if you think that Jawan Jennings is a good player, then even 19 catches for him is pretty anemic. They just threw the ball less than everybody else by a wide margin. I showed the chart a couple days ago, and they not only do they throw it less than everybody else by a wide margin, but they threw it the percentage of times that they had 3 wide receivers on the field for those throws was also by far the lowest. So that does kind of tell you if they're going to get these guys involved. What you were talking about was they do need to throw more, and they also need to have 3 wide receivers on the field a little bit more. I'm also not, I don't think Debo's going anywhere. I don't think Ayuk's going anywhere, and I don't necessarily think Jennings is gone. But I still see if Pearsall comes out and he really impresses during training camp or these early mini camps, I could see them trying to get something for Jawan Jennings. I really could, because Pearsall to me is more of a slot wide receiver. I think you want to manufacture touches for him, get him in motion and running towards, running side to side before you snap the ball, and don't allow corners to get hands on him. I think at least early on in his career, while he's still trying to figure out how to beat press and stuff like that, it'll be easier for him to get touches that way. But I think him coming out of the slot is what makes a lot of sense. So maybe they find a way to go get something for Jennings versus just letting him walk this next year. I don't know. But ultimately, if all these guys stay, they do have some depth. You've got to imagine that Debo's going to miss a couple games here or there, so you'll get to see what Pearsall looks like and some of these other guys. And maybe they throw out some wrinkles and you just get some 5 wide receiver sets from time to time and get all 5 of them involved. I don't think that'll happen often, but it is something they can mix in. I just don't see, if I set the over under at 35 catches for Pearsall his rookie year, would you take the over or the under?
You said 35?
35 catches.
Damn. Probably going under. But I truly do think the Niners go a little more pass happy this year. So I kind of want to go over just because he has the opportunity to be that kind of guy who could get 40 to 50 catches as a third receiver. But I don't see the Niners passing that often. But a way you can manufacture some catches, right? What about you sit Christian McCaffrey a little bit more and you put in a third down pass blocking back, a guy like Isaac Guerrero who could pick up blitzes and stuff like that. That's 67 receptions right there, 83 targets that you're getting from Christian McCaffrey by just taking him out of the game a little bit more often. Now, come playoff time, he's healthier. But like you said, special teams is going to be a way they manufacture touches. And I think that's going to be the thing. And I think Jawan Jennings actually has signed his tender.
He has. It's funny though. I bring this up because I thought a couple days ago he didn't, and then the chat got my mind right, and I went through and double checked, and certainly he did. It was like the 20th of what was it, March, I guess. Somehow it flew under the radar. I never saw it. A lot of people never saw it. I've been watching other shows, and they've been saying the same thing. They didn't think he had signed. So, Paul, you're not alone. I thought this just a couple days ago. He has signed his tender. He posted it on Instagram. The 49ers also had posted about it. So I don't know. I don't know how we all missed it, but
I found out recently because I was live with someone and then we were talking about it. And then he's like, I don't know if he signed. And I looked it up. I was like, oh, perfect. Like Instagram posted and everything. That's all that matters.
Yeah. Yeah. So I didn't, I had no idea either. It just kind of flew under the radar for a lot of us. So it's interesting because I was in the same exact situation just 2 or 3 days ago, but he has signed. Yeah, I don't know, man. I think that, and it's not all about your rookie year. It really isn't. And I hate to keep harping on it, but when you draft a 24-year-old receiver in the first round, I feel like he's got to get some touches, man. You can't just have him be the 6th receiving option in your offense, which is, we can look at the receivers, all right, and we can say, all right, he's not going to get more than Debo. He's not going to get more than Ayuk. Presumably wouldn't get more than Jennings, but he's also not going to get more than Kittle, and he's not going to get more than CMC. So he's option number 6 in your offense. This is what you spent pick 31 on a team that is a win now team. And then for the future, by the time he actually does get a lot of run, assuming that that doesn't happen this year, and maybe it does, maybe they do have this amazing role built in for him and one of these other guys fall back. I don't know. But assuming that's not the case, he'll be 25, which is the same age as BA just was after his, what was it, fourth year in the league?
Third year, fourth year.
I don't know, man.
And I think
I don't
too,
know.
like, because I know you brought up a chat right before that said depth wise. Oh, Jesse, it means that we lack depth. Couldn't you have gotten depth later in the draft? Like a Javon Baker would have been a good depth piece, or a guy Malik Washington, a depth piece. Like if you're looking for depth, you don't go get depth in the first round, especially at the receiver position when year in year out the NFL draft is producing receivers in the fourth, fifth round that are coming out and they're putting up stats. So if you're looking for depth, you get that later in the draft. The Niners are truly looking for a guy to replace Deebo Samuel within the next 2 years, and that's why they went Ricky Pearsall, and that's something that's going to move moving forward. We'll see with the 49ers if he can replace Deebo at a high level.
For sure. And Ray says, could it be a post-June 1st? I really don't see it, not anymore, especially the way that John Lynch was talking in that interview. He made it sound like it's pretty final, that they're good with what they have. Like, yeah, we took some calls. That's all over now. We're moving forward with this wide receiver room as is. Now, that doesn't mean that these guys always tell the truth, but I just feel like that time has come and passed if you were going to make a trade. And looking at it, this team, it's the same argument I made for Eric Armstead. It was like, well, Eric Armstead was a full-on free agent after this year. Like, just keep him on the team. He's better than a lot of people, even if you only get him 8 games, whatever, you're paying him anyways. Might as well just keep him on the team and try to go win a Super Bowl one last time with him. It's the same argument I would make for Deebo, and I certainly don't think Ayuk's gone after June 1st. So no, I don't see it happening, but I guess anything's possible.
I would probably say it's 95% chance that both receivers are on the team. Like, I don't see it happening at all. Like, realistically, how do you sell to the fan base during win now mode if you trade one of them now and you can't draft a player to replace them or players to replace them on the roster, not necessarily at the position of receiver, but going and getting a true corner, defensive lineman to make your team better? They don't have that luxury anymore, so I don't see it happening at all at this point.
Yeah, Paul says, I'm going off of what JJ posted on his IG 2 days ago. He has not announced he signed a deal, and the 49ers did. He actually had posted on his IG a picture of the tender and said year 4 with the rocket ship. That was a while ago. I don't know what he said 2 days ago, unless he was just like acting like he was going to sign it and he didn't. I don't know. Either way, like, I'm assuming he's a part of the team. I thought he had signed it. Now you're saying no, so I don't know. I'll have to go look at that. I feel like he did sign it, but either way, I think that he's going to be a part of the team. I don't know. All right. Anything else from that interview that we missed?
I think those are the main topics. He talked a little about other stuff, but those are the main 2 points that I took from the interview, at least.
Okay, perfect. Adam Peters. Question for you on this, and I asked the same thing to Sunil a couple days ago, but I wanted to ask you as well, just because you do put so much effort into learning these prospects, and you probably remember a lot of the prospects that they took and what they were as prospects versus what they've become. That's often 2 very different things, right? All you can do is evaluate the prospect and try to foreshadow what it's going to look like in the NFL. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's how it's going to pan out. When you look at this draft compared to prior drafts with Adam Peters, do you see a big difference? And I'll go first on this one and say that I personally didn't, but a lot of that I think could be because Adam Peters technically was in the room for a big chunk of when you're doing scouting. Like, he didn't leave until, what are we talking, February?
End of the year. Yeah.
January, something like that. So, he was a big part of at least the beginning of the scouting, and scouting really isn't just a 1-year thing. You've been scouting a lot of these guys for years. Adam Peters was a part of that. Now, he wasn't in the room and calling some of the shots and pounding the table for certain guys. I get that. So maybe a slight difference. But to me, round 1 felt like they reached for somebody. Check. They do that almost all the time. Did they trade up for a running back? Yep, sure did. Check on that. Isaac Arendo. Do they try to hedge their bets a little bit? So when they draft a position group early, they come back in a later round and do that to make sure that they got the right guy. And if that guy that they drafted first isn't the right guy, they've got somebody else who might be. Well, yeah, they did that with the wide receiver room as well. So I don't know. I didn't see a lot of difference in what the 49ers did. And I was going back and looking at the trenches and the way they've drafted. The most that they've ever since 2017 taken, and when I say trenches, I mean offensive line and defensive line combined, the most that they've drafted is 3 players in the trenches, which is, they took 2 this year. That's right in line. So I don't know. I didn't see a lot of differences. Did you see any differences?
The only difference I saw, and this is something I don't know if it's has to do because Adam wasn't there or this is how the Niners preferred, but I felt like they truly wanted to go older guys who had playing time in college. So it was more of a safe pick than the risky biscuit where you're going out and risking everything you can in terms of you're getting the higher potential player, not necessarily the player that's going to pan out to be the better player in the NFL because you're projecting upside. So I don't know if it's that. But also too, I did notice some Moneyball picks towards the end, and I hadn't seen that without Adam Peters. And what I mean by Moneyball picks, you go back to Kingston, right? No one had him on a draft board. Like you go to any NFL expert, they did not have him getting drafted. They had him as an undrafted free agent. But when you look at some of the numbers, and these are key analytic numbers that you look at, his short shuttle as an interior offensive line. If you had a 4.47 short shuttle, you were projected like to start more games and hold your starting position for a longer period of time. Well, he had a 4.47 short shuttle, and that's what the 49ers kind of went for rather than the higher upside pick or the better player in a Bo Limmer, 7th round pick, a Leonard Taylor, right? Film's phenomenal. Character issue maybe a concern, but it's a 7th round pick, and you're taking a guy who's undersized. So that's where I did see the difference in terms of when the Niners used to draft, they would draft higher upside players in the first couple of rounds. And it was a guy who potentially didn't pan out, but it was a guy that they truly liked with the upside. Later in the draft, they would come and they would go get a player who his film shows really, really good film. But for some reason, testing wise, he didn't test as well. And that's where you got the Hufangas, the Kittles, the Fred Warners. Versus this year, it was like, that guy's film's not that good, but he tested off the charts. Let's go get him. And that's kind of what I saw with Kingston. Batoon didn't test well. Film's not that great either. So that one's like kind of a little interesting as well. So that's the only differences I noticed without Adam Peters versus Peters being here.
Yeah, that is interesting. I guess that is a little bit of a difference. I didn't catch that. That's Ray actually brings up a good point. He says the Niners not only got him, but they got 2 in the draft and a free agent on a budget who all had a 4.47 or below shuttle. Might be something to that, Marco.
And that's something I noticed on all, like when they took Kingston, I was like, went back. Because the reason why I had watched Kingston wasn't because I was like, hey, this guy's draftable. I'm going to watch him and sit down. I don't do that. Like I like to go and find some guys who I'll go off of other people's boards who do they have draftable? When I watched the Caleb Williams tape, when I watched Brendan Rice tape, he showed up, but for not for good reasons. So that's why I know Kingston. And I felt like that was a Moneyball pick. They're like, you know what? It matches these analytics. These analytics have proven with guys, for example, there's like Jason Kelsey's like the number 1 for this analytic and everything like that. So maybe they're onto something. Maybe they just were like, hey, it's a 6th round pick. Who cares anyways? But interesting thing that I found from that.
Yeah, well, and they, to me, I think, first of all, I don't think there's any reaches really, especially round 5, 6, and 7. You kind of just taking flyers, throwing darts at the dartboard. Now, the 49ers darts that they throw in round 5 specifically have been incredible. And then obviously you hit on Brock Purdy in round 7, but ultimately, I don't think you can really reach there. Round 4, you can reach there. Really, rounds 1, 2, and 3. That's where your reaches actually come from. Your big time reaches. I think in round 4, Garendo might be considered a reach. Really, not just because of where they drafted him, but because they traded 2/5 to make that happen. So maybe I guess you could consider that, but even then, it's like round 4, you're kind of on the borderline where I
Mhm.
don't know if you can ever reach as much in round 4. You definitely can in rounds 1 through 3, in my opinion.
And I agree because later in the draft, when Adam Peters was around, or during the time that the Niners had success,
Mhm.
it wasn't them going the athletic traits in those later rounds from 4 to 7. It was whose film shows up week in, week out, and they're the better player. And that's what they were essentially drafting. First 3 rounds, and we've all said it, the Niners in the first round, they suck because they draft high upside players who have potential and they never hit their potential. And that is something that, hey, maybe Adam Peters was part of that. Maybe
Mhm.
Adam Peters was a terrible first round or first 3 rounds guy, and maybe he's gonna suck in the first 3 rounds, just like he did in San Francisco. Who knows? But that's something that I was like, wait, normally Niners are going high upside here, first round, second round. Like normally if Kool-Aid McKinstry was there on the board when Adam Peters was there, I truly think they would have gone Kool-Aid McKinstry, knowing that he has the high potential, or going the AD Mitchell or the Xavier Leggett, who they have explosive athleticism. They could change your franchise, and they didn't. So that's where I'm like, it's gonna be fun to watch for the next couple of years now.
They kinda it's interesting because they kind of flipped, right? Because I guess now that I'm thinking about it, early on, they would go with the high potential guys a lot, and that's where they would miss, and then they would go off a
Mhm.
film late, it seemed like. Now it's almost like they flipped. They took the high potential guys late, which actually I think makes more sense to do that. Just take
Yeah,
some flyers, you never know. And then they went with like the steady Eddie guys. Like Ricky Purcell, I don't think his ceiling is near what a lot of those receivers that went after him is. But what I can say is he's certainly more polished than those guys right now. Like if he had to step in and play right now, versus some of those guys, I think he would perform better. Now, in 2 years, I don't know that that's still the case, but right now, I would say, hey, higher floor, lower ceiling, and maybe that's all they're looking for right now. I don't know.
but I think the difference too, though, is like let's say Ricky Pearsall hits his ceiling, right? Let's say Xavier
Mhm.
Leggett, Mitchell, and a couple of guys who got drafted after them hit their
Yeah,
ceiling. Their ceiling's a lot higher
for sure.
than Pearsall. Same thing with some of the corners that were there. Cooper DeJean, his ceiling, Kool-Aid McKinstry, their ceilings
But
are a
let me
lot
ask you
higher.
this. Let me ask you this. Can we'll use AD Mitchell just because I know that you liked him a lot, right? Can you see a scenario where AD Mitchell, obviously, you can see him as possibly a number 1 receiver in the long term. I know that you like him that much, but could you also see a scenario where he just completely is a bust and doesn't pan out?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because you had like
Okay.
again, you're going a guy who has the freak potential. So if he doesn't reach that freak potential, it's gonna look like a bust pick because he's gonna be a 500, 600 yard receiver for the next couple of years, and it's not gonna look like the true player that everyone was hyping or everyone wanted. For example, Javon Kinlaw, his potential was there. He never
Mhm.
lived up to it, and he has had a good season, a season or two, but we wanted a 10 sack player replacing the Forrest Buckner. Like, right? Like that, the high potential was there, never lived
Yeah.
up to it. So it's always going to be a terrible pick.
But with Ricky Pearsall, I mean, I don't necessarily see number 1 receiver on
No,
him. I think his ceiling is at number 2, a good number 2, but I also think his floor is like a really
solid
good number
receiver
3.
three. Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So maybe that's what it is. Like, hey, we know worst case scenario, which isn't worthy of a first round pick. Like neither would be worthy of a first round pick. So sure, if they both hit their potential, Ricky, he's a high tier number 2 versus a high tier
Mitchell's the number
1, which
one.
is what
Yeah.
Mitchell is, right?
Yeah.
But I could see Mitchell being a 400-yard guy every single year and not panning out. And Ricky, it's like, okay, worst case scenario, once Debo's gone and he's in the spot, it's like, I think he could be worst case 650, 700 yards every single season. Again,
Yeah.
not worthy of a first round pick, but a little bit higher floor. So that's what they're looking at. Just go with a little bit more safety, especially if, and this is a possible scenario as well. Remember, they only had 22 players that were first round picks. Maybe they didn't have any of those receivers as first round picks. They really wanted a receiver there. They felt like the talent was just as good there versus some of the other positions. They didn't have any more players left on their first round board. So they're
Mhm.
like, hey, let's just go with a safety option. Okay.
And that's honestly a good way if you truly believe, for example, going the safe player is a good thing if you think Brock Purdy is the real deal, right? Like if you think Brock is the franchise quarterback that you're willing to pay 60 million a year, that's a smart move because now you're putting good players around him and he's going to elevate a good player to make them a great player. So that, I mean, like at the end of the day, it's not nothing wrong that they took Ricky Pearsall. It's just a little bit earlier than we would have wanted, and that's just the differences that I noticed. So like safe players all around, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I want to point this out because a lot of people talk about it like, hey, the slot receiver position is extremely important. Safety blanket, remember Julian Edelman. But when you look at all the really good slot receivers, most of them are UDFAs. And the one that's not, that is most recent, which is Cooper Kupp, third round pick. So slot, if you're getting a pure slot receiver, they're not first round guys. Those are not guys you take in round one because they have to produce from the slot. They can't go be outside receivers and perform at the same level. The outside receivers are traditionally what you take because those are your guys that go up and get the ball, and you got to be more athletic, and you're facing number one corners and all those types of things. If he does end up playing in the slot, that's where I think he's probably going to fit best personally. But slot guys are not first round picks traditionally. So, again, it is what it is. He's on the team. Now we're just going to root for him. That's what we do as fans. But ultimately, that's not traditionally, I should say, that's not what you do. You don't take slot guys in round one. So
I'm not gonna let you sit here and call Julian Edelman an undrafted free agent, bro. He was drafted in the seventh round. All right.
okay, all right. You're right. What Amendola, Welker, weren't they UDFAs?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay, that's how. So overall, I think those guys were UDFA. Edelman, you're right, was a late round pick, and then Cup was round 3, I believe. So yeah, traditionally, not really first rounders. PDX Snyder says Debo moved only if a good training camp cut player is around. Yeah, man, I think it'll take a lot to move on from Debo at this point. PDX Niner says only they would need the cap this year. And that's the other thing too. I'm so back and forth on the Debo Samuel thing because what they did with Eric Armstead is they let him go. He was set to be a free agent. So basically, he was off your books after this year outside of a couple $1 million for signing bonus stuff. Now you have to pay him $15 million next year to not be on the team. Debo Samuel, it's like if you move on from him now and you just take the cap hit now, you'll have a couple $1 million that trickles over like next year. But if you decide to wait till next year, you're going to take a cap hit not only next year, but probably the year after, like you did with Armstead, right? So that's what makes this really difficult. What are you going to do? How are you going to handle paying these guys when they're not on the team versus just letting them go, taking the cap casualty now, knowing that your team is still really good and he fits under that number and you can afford to do that? I don't know. I just think there's multiple ways to look at it, but I'm just
You,
not a fan of paying guys to not be here
I
personally.
mean, you could also look at it in a way of going safe picks was because of that, right? Like you're going to safe
Mhm.
pick because you know you're gonna have to cut Debo next year or trade Debo next year
Yeah.
and save that money. So you're getting a player who could at least come in and produce versus you're
Mhm.
going an upside pick where you don't know what's gonna happen with that upside pick. So I think that could be also a reason why they went the safe pick with Ricky Pearsall because truthfully we know he's gonna come in and put up numbers. Like he's if you don't put up numbers in Kyle's offense as a good receiver, there's something wrong. Like that's truthfully what happens.
Yeah, I agree with that. Dazza says if Debo is moved, that frees up more targets as well for BA Kittle and Pearsall. And the offense doesn't have to be designed around him. Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing with Debo. Debo is obviously a really good player. He's brought a lot to this team, and I don't want to throw shade his way. I love that he's still here for sure as a player and what he brings, but you do have to manufacture touches for him. Like you have to game plan around him to get in. He's not like if this was basketball, right? He's a guy that has to have the ball in his hands. He's not going to just impact the game in a big way without the touches being manufactured for him. And that's, to me, that's at a detriment to some of the players around him, to your point, Daza. And that was certainly at a detriment to the players around him in the Super Bowl, because they tried to force feed him the ball, because they know if Debo had gotten going in that Super Bowl, it would have been curtains. I mean, he can take over a game sometimes, and you're just like, dude, there is nothing the other team's going to do about it. So that's what they were hoping for. Hey, let's get the ball in his hands. Let's manufacture some of these touches. Let him take over the game. And then it's like we're rolling downhill. This is perfect. Unfortunately, he never got going. And because you have to manufacture those touches for him, nobody else got going either. And that's where the issue came in. And that's ultimately why you couldn't put up points consistently. And that's why you lost the Super Bowl. So I don't know. It's tough.
Yeah, it's interesting. I felt like they manufactured them the wrong way during the Super Bowl. They were trying to do it downfield. I don't give them a quick bubble screen, get them going that way, where it's going to be a completion. You're going to get 6 yards out of it, and doing the slant stuff, the routes that he was running, not his MO.
Well, and I would say, and Dale's talking about, they should have adjusted the game plan. They had the out, Dale, because remember, he got a little dinged up in that game. So they easily could have been like, listen, Debo, we know the game plan was this, but now it looks like you tweaked your hammy. We're going to go a different direction. You go be the best decoy you can go block for us, go do your thing, but we got to go. So they had the built-in excuse to change the game plan. They still didn't do it. So. All right, let's talk about these power rankings. Now, obviously, a game hasn't been played. The other part of this that I'm not taking into account for, and maybe you are, is the schedule. Schedule is not fully out yet. We know what teams that everybody's playing. The rumor is the schedule release is going to be next Thursday. I hope that's the case. I love the schedule release because you can look at the opponents and come up with where you think the team is going to fall. But then you see how the games are and when they are, and is it on a short week? Is this team coming off of a bye? Is it long travel followed by long travel? There's so many factors that go into it. At what time of year is it? So what's the weather going to look like? There's a lot that you can look at, and it really can change by a game or two just because of the way the schedule lays out. Not because the opponents are any different, but the way that it lays out. So I didn't take any of that into account for any of these teams. I'm just strictly looking at the rosters, what they lost, what they gained in free agency, and then a few players that they drafted. Obviously, I can go player for player, every single guy they took, but what is like the top 2 or 3 guys that they took, and what does that look like? So, do you want me to start? Well, let's go from 10 to 1.
Are you going? Okay, I think that's 10 to 1. Okay.
Yeah, I don't want to give. I mean, one, I think we're probably going to agree is Kansas City. So I don't, spoiler alert.
Wrong.
But all right, well, maybe not. But either way, I think going 10 to 1 makes the most sense. So I'll go first. I'll give you my number 10 team, and then you can give me your number 10 team. My number 10 team in the NFL power rankings, as it stands right now, is the Cleveland Browns. Now, Cleveland made the playoffs last year. I would have them higher if I could, because their roster is so damn stacked. I just don't know what Deshaun Watson is anymore. If I'm going off the last couple years, he's shot. He's a shot player. But there's still a part of me that's like, but maybe he could still be that really good player that was in Houston. If he turns into that again, the Browns are a top 5 team in this league. They're absolutely stacked. If he's shot, I still think they can be the 10th best team, because we kind of saw it last year, right? How many different quarterbacks did they play? They were still a major threat. They've got a phenomenal defense, and they added more than they lost. So the biggest loss they had was Sione Takitaki, linebacker, but they added Jerry Jeudy in free agency. They also added Jordan Hicks in free agency. And then the 3 big draft picks they had were Michael Hall, Zach Zenner, and Jamari Thrash. I think they improved the roster as a whole. We'll see what Deshaun Watson is. Best case scenario for them, he's really good and they're a top 5 team. Worst case is he's basically what he's been, and I still think they're the 10th best team in the league. So I've got the Cleveland Browns at number 10. Who's your number 10 team?
It's crazy because I was debating between the Cleveland Browns at this point, but when you name the quarterback, I can't expect him. No, not necessarily the quarterback, but I can't expect him to be better than when he was last year, because like he looked lost. So
He
I actually
did.
have the Los Angeles Rams at 10. Their interior offensive line is much better. They would have been much higher if they had Aaron Donald on their defense. So
For
losing Aaron
sure.
Donald is huge. Their draft picks, they want to pick up Jared Verse, Braden Fisk in the second round to try to replace that defensive line. They signed a couple of corners in free agency to up their. They knew that Donald was going, so they upped their secondary, even though their defensive line wasn't going to be as great. So I have them at 10 because they have a great offense. They lost a lot of defense, and hopefully Stafford or whatever the case may be could carry them. If you're a Rams fan, that's what you want. Niner fans know we're going to bully the shit out of them because they're the little brother. That is how it is. So I
Absolutely.
gotta make sure I
Absolutely.
gotta make sure I don't lose your follow your all your subscribers and everything. They're like, damn, Marco was just constantly hating on the
Listen,
Niners.
hold on,
You know what I'm
no, hold
saying?
on. First of all, there's nothing you're gonna say that pisses him off more than me. I already piss him off enough. The ones that are here, they like me for me, I guess, is the only explanation I have because I'm very critical of the team by all means. So yeah, I don't think there's anything you're going to say that pisses them off any more than what I already do. So just give your
Who
real opinion, man. If your real opinion is you've got, 10 teams above the 49ers, then say you got 10 teams above the 49ers. Like, I'm not holding back any punches. I'm giving my real opinion. I expect for you to do the same. If
No,
people
I give my
consider
real
it hate,
opinion, but
then
I
let
just
it
want to
let
make
it be.
sure I throw in some jabs, like make sure, you know, I'm not just a Niner hater. I'm a Niner fan, but I'm very critical of them. And a lot of people are like, you're overly critical. So let me make sure I throw in
Okay.
some jabs as a fan.
I feel it. I feel it. All right. Number 9 for me is the Buffalo Bills. I almost didn't have them on this list. And then I was debating between them and the Browns at 10. But ultimately, when you have, in my opinion, the clear second best quarterback in the NFL on your team, you're going to be really good. You're going to be competing. So the way that I see it is they lost Stephon Diggs, they lost Mitch Morse, they lost Jordan Poyer. A lot of big losses. However, they did add Curtis Samuel and Mike Edwards. And then in the draft, they got Keon Coleman, Dwayne Carter, and Cedric Van Pran. I just think ultimately they're in a flux year. I don't expect them to go super far or anything like that, but I do still think that they're going to win their division. I think that Josh Allen is an absolute stud. So barring an injury to him, I think that they're going to be fine. And I actually think Stephon Diggs is addition by subtraction for that team. I do. Because now you're going to see a lot more two tight end. You're going to see a bigger commitment to the run like you saw down the stretch. You're not going to see him force feeding the ball to Diggs in some weird areas. He's going to, by proxy, he's going to have to play it safer. He just is. And I think for him, that's a good thing. He's also going to be an absolute threat with his legs like he always is. He's going to get you 35 plus touchdowns this year, no matter what. That's what he always does. So, Josh Allen's that deal. I think the defense got younger and probably healthier. That's been their biggest issue. They've had a lot of big name players, but they just couldn't stay healthy. So ultimately, the way that I see it, the Bills, I have at number 9. Who's your number 9 team?
I actually have the Cincinnati Bengals at 9. And the reason why I have
Okay.
them at 9, they have a stacked roster, right? Like
They
but
do.
they lost DJ Reader. They might lose T. Higgins. So
I don't
like
think they're going to lose them,
I
but
don't
we'll
think they
see.
will either, but we never
Yeah.
know. Trey Hendrickson's also requesting a trade. But my biggest reason on having him at 9 is because of that injury that Joe Burrow had. I was talking to a guy who does like physical therapy and stuff like that for college and professional athletes, and he's like, dude, he's like, the injury he has is rare. Like you don't see this in athletes. He goes, I don't know how he's gonna bounce back, how he's gonna be able to grip a ball, how he takes hits. He goes, he likely does bounce back because he's a super athlete. He goes, but that's a very big concern. Their offensive line is also a concern. They just took Amarius Mims. And if he's starting at left tackle or right tackle, wherever he is, the likelihood of him getting hurt or him being a good pick, they're about the same, 50-50. Like he's more likely to get hurt than he is to be a great pick for them. They replaced DJ Reader with Chris Jenkins, which I thought it was a good pick. Picked up Jermaine Burton, who should be another solid. So they upped their offense, right? Like they went offense this draft, especially getting Eric All. I just don't think they have enough with the injury. The subtraction of DJ Reader is going to be huge. I believe they lost a corner as well in free agency. So very interested to see how they go.
Yeah, I actually don't have the Bengals in my top 10. And that was a tough one. That was like the one that's probably my biggest snub is the Bengals. And but the problem is when I looked at 11, this is what it really came down to. Number 10 came down to 4 teams for me. It was the Browns. 3 are in that division. The Browns, the Steelers, the Bengals, and the Jets. Like those were the 4 teams. I'm like, how do I decide between these teams who to put in here? And I just simply had to go by the team that I think probably stayed as close to possible as what they were last year and has, in my opinion, the best defense out of those teams. So I had to go with the Browns, but I mean, I don't know. I could see a situation where the Bengals are there, the Steelers, the way they reworked their draft was so impressive to me. They got 3 starting offensive linemen off rip. Very impressive, crushing the trenches, but I just I couldn't go with the Bengals, man. I couldn't. They're super talented. We'll see how it ends up, but I had to leave them off my list. So
So did you leave the Jets off your list too? Then
I did, yeah.
it makes sense.
I
Yeah, I
did.
had that was the hardest one. I had them bouncing around with the Bengals, and I was like, you know what? Just looking at their roster and everything, is A Rod still A Rod?
That's the tough
The
part.
receiving core is shaky, so like tough
I just
decision.
think they're relying on a lot of players coming off of major injuries or are injury prone. So when you look at their tackle situation, their quarterback situation, their wide receiver number 2 situation, you're relying on 3 guys that are either coming off of major injury, are injury prone, or both in some scenarios, like Mike Williams. So it's if any one of those 3 guys or 2 of those 3 go down, where are the Jets at? I just a ton of talent. They are supremely talented. You just go player for player through their roster, they're up there. I mean, they're a top 7 roster in this league, player for player, but I've got to see them stay healthy first before I can even consider them being a serious team. Plus, they're still the Jets, so I don't know. There's something to the uniform too. It took me a while to believe in the Lions, right? So I just got to see it happen before I fully believe in it. Brother Bob says Marco Nails said the Chiefs game. You down, bro? Yeah. So I said that there's 3 games that I want to go to. I want to go to the Chiefs. I want to go to the Bills, and I'm going to go to the Tampa game, obviously. But it all depends on where they fall, and that's why I'm looking forward to the schedule as well. If one of them's on Christmas or New Year's or something, I'm not going to go to that game. So, and I would love to go to Buffalo and catch a game, but I also don't know how ecstatic I would be about a December game in Buffalo. It's just freezing, or January. You
Chiefs
know what I
game at
mean?
home?
What was that?
Is Chiefs at home or is it in Kansas City?
It's at Levi, I believe.
At Levi.
I
I'll think about
believe.
that
I
one.
believe. Yeah.
I just don't like watching Patrick Mahomes in person though, because I'm not trying to go to a game and us lose to him.
Yeah, I don't know. I just think that Josh Allen's better than Joe Burrow. I mean, that's what it comes down to. Now, maybe head to head, I would pick the Bengals based off of what you're saying. I get it. Like the Bengals seem to have the number of the Bills, but they're not playing each other 17 times this year. They're playing other teams 17 times. You know what I mean? And Josh Allen's a better player than Burrow. I don't Burrow to me is really, really good. I also think he might be the most overrated quarterback in the NFL.
I would agree with that.
And that's, by the way, I still think he's a top 5, top 6 guy, but some people have him at number 2. It's the same way I think about John Elway. Up until like Brady and Patrick Mahomes and Manning and those guys came around, some people had Elway as like the GOAT or second best quarterback of all time. And I'm like, listen, Elway's great. He's a top 10 quarterback of all time. But if you have him number 1 or number 2, he's overrated. So I think you can be both. I think you can be really good, but I also think you can be overrated. And I think Joe Burrow is really good. I think he's super overrated. I don't see how anybody can, with a straight face, put him at number 2. I don't see it personally. So I don't know.
So then that's who do you have at we just gave 9. Who do you have at 8 then?
Ooh, I've got the Philadelphia Eagles at number 8. So they lost Jason Kelsey and Hassan Reddick, big names, but they signed Saquon Barkley, Bryce Huff, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. They drafted Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, and Jalix Hunt. And really the biggest change is that coaching staff. That's what it comes down to. The coaching staff that they had in place 2 years ago, offensive and defensive coordinator wise, very good. Last year, you had a very similar team, and we saw a major drop off. And I think that was in a large part due to the coaching staff. I think they had horrible coaches. Now you go and you get a top tier defensive mind. You went and upgraded his weapons in a big way in the secondary. That's going to be really, really hard to not see them getting much better on defense. And then offensively, not a big fan of who's the offensive coordinator. He was a quarterback at Boise State, and then he was
Kellen
Dallas
Moore.
Cowboys guy. Kellen Moore.
I believe.
Yeah, Kellen Moore. I'm not the biggest fan of him, but compared to what they had last year, major upgrade. I don't care. Yeah. Major upgrade. So I think they upgraded their coaching staff in a big way. And then even though they lost some big name players, I genuinely think they added more talent than what they lost. So I have the Eagles at number 8. Who do you have?
I believe it's the Bills, because you have Bills. A similar reason, like Josh Allen's gonna be able to carry their team. Doug McDermott's a really good defensive coordinator, so he's gonna be able to scheme up things. Now they did lose Tre'Davious White, I believe. So you are gonna get a little fall off defensively, but that's where an elite quarterback carries their team, right? Keon Coleman's gonna go crazy with them. I think that's a great fit for them. You're gonna see a very drastic change in their offense. I think you're gonna see a lot more running the ball. Dawson Knox, Schultz, they're going to be going. Those are going to be the offensive style, and I think it actually fits.
Kincaid.
Yeah,
they're the same guy, basically.
Same thing, pretty much.
Same difference.
Same thing. I mean, tight end who's athletic, white, same thing, right? But I think when you have a guy like Josh Allen who could carry the load, I think they're always going to be in the top 10. Like you could carry that team. And then I actually had the Bills right after. So I had the Bills, 7? The Eagles, Eagles at 7. In a similar situation. Yeah, they lost a lot of players, but adding Saquon, but most importantly, their coaching staff is changing. Adding Kenyon Mitchell across from why can I not think Big Play Stay. So having him there, like that's going to be an upgrade at their corners position. Cooper DeJean is the ultimate wild card for them. How is he going to be used? Is he going to be used as that star role? And if they do use him as that star role, then that's a really good pick. So their secondary is going to be much, much, much improved. So it's all about coaching at that point. And I think just the addition of Saquon opens things up for them, because now that read option, that RPO is going to be phenomenal for them. It's going to work with the AJ Brown, Saquon, Hurts. Like that's going to be a really good RPO system they have over there. I'm very interested to see how Kellen Moore adds his little touch into the RPO game, because I know he likes to add a little flair to the RPO.
You know, it's interesting because I wasn't a big fan of Cooper DeJean, but it's all about the fit. And for me, there was 2 teams that if Cooper DeJean went to, they could get the most out of them just because of the way that they style this. Actually, 3 teams, because McDonald just went from the Ravens to Seattle, so I could see him working out there as well. But the way that they interchange the secondary with safeties and corners, and corners playing nickel and moving out and simulated pressures and all those other things, Cooper DeJean, to me, if he went to the Ravens, the Seahawks, because McDonald is now over there, or the Eagles, I love the pick all of a sudden. Would not have liked it on most other teams. Would have been like, not a big fan. The fact they got him in round 2, I think makes a lot of sense for that team in particular. With the defensive coordinator they've got in place, it all adds up. And talk about interchangeable. They got Chauncey Gardner-Johnson with Cooper DeJean. You really can go. You can play them both at safety. You can play one at safety, one at nickel. You can play one at star, one at nickel. You can play one at safety, one at star. Like there's so many options that you can go with, and they're both interchangeable for all of those positions. So I like Cooper DeJean for the Eagles. And if he had gone to the Ravens or Seahawks, I would have felt the same way. But those are the only teams, honestly, that I would have felt that way. So I think, again, they had some big losses, certainly. I think they brought in more talent than what they lost. So
I agree.
All right. So you had the Eagles at 7. I'll give my number 7 then, and then we'll move on to 6. Number 7, I have the Green Bay Packers. Now, they lost John Runyon and Darnell Savage, But, oh, and Aaron Jones as well. But they brought in Josh Jacobs and Xavier McKinney. I think Jacobs at this stage in his career is an upgrade over Jones. I think Xavier McKinney is a major upgrade over Darnell Savage. And yes, they lost John Runyon, but that's why they went and drafted Jordan Morgan. So you bring in Jordan Morgan, Edgerrin Cooper, Javon Bullard. Those were their major draft picks. Green Bay is just a young team that's ascending at this point. They're a young team that got their chops wet in the playoffs last year. I only see them improving this year. So ultimately, I think the Green Bay Packers, I have them at number 7. Now, again, if I'm comparing to them, the Eagles, for a great example, or even the Browns, or even the Jets for that matter, I don't know that they have as much talent on paper as those guys. But because they're so young, there's so many players that are going to start breaking out kind of all over the place where it's like, yeah, they're not household names now, but in 2 to 3 years, they just might be. So I think that Jordan Love takes the next step as well. I trust their coaching staff. So I'm going to have the Packers at number 7.
That's interesting because I actually had the Packers at 6. So I'll go next. And so that's very interesting. It's like, it's for me, I thought their linebacking core was terrible. And they got a huge upgrade with Edgerrin Cooper. I thought Edgerrin Cooper should have won in the late first, early second. They got him at pick 45. That's a hell of a pick. Like you said, upping their offensive line with Jordan Morgan. But I think the picks that are getting slept on a little bit is the 2 safety guys they got. Evan Williams, who could be a linebacker safety guy. Keaton Oladapo, also a linebacker safety guy. But Javon Bullard, you could play him anywhere. He could be your star guy. Like, they added so much talent last year, receiver-wise, as a young group. This year, they went, you know what? Let's throw a bunch of darts at the board for secondary, for the safety, nickel, big high, like nickel roll kind of vibe that the NFL is going to. And I thought that was a smart thing for them. So I do think Jordan Love is going to keep ascending upwards. Their coaching staff is there. So to be honest, I think they're the team that if they could hit on all cylinders, because everyone forgets they started off the year solid, and then Jordan Love went on like this bad run, like where teams figured him out a little bit, and then he kind of came back to himself and started playing great late down the stretch, and he led a pretty good team, a young team to be exact, deep into the playoffs, in my opinion. I thought that was a lot deeper than anyone had anticipated them to go when they let go of Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, absolutely. My number 6 team, I think, is going to shock you a bit. In fact, I know it's going to shock you based off of where they were on your list. I have the Rams at number 6.
Damn.
So they lost Aaron Donald.
That's crazy because they just lost Donald. That's crazy.
They lost Aaron Donald. But you look at what they did to that offensive line. They just went and beefed that thing all the way up. Okay. They added Jonah Jackson. They added Cam Curl in free agency. They also added Tre'Davious White. I didn't have him on my list as big time ads. He could be a big time ad, but he's also could just be shot, right? So big name. Tre'Davious White's a big name, but I can't put him as like a big ad yet. So they added Jonah Jackson. They added Cam Curl. Yes, they lost Aaron Donald, but how do you go solve for Aaron Donald? Well, you draft defensive line like crazy 2 years in a row, and you just throw a bunch of spaghetti against the wall and hope something sticks. Well, they actually had a couple guys from last year stick. And then you went and add Jared Verse and Braden Fisk to the mix. Braden Fisk, is one GM put it, said he's Max Crosby at the defensive tackle position. Dude, if you get a Max Crosby at defensive tackle, you're getting an absolute stud. They added Blake Corum in the draft. Blake Corum, I'm kind of iffy on, but you look at a team that is transitioning back to the running game. They're beefing up their offensive line. They've got, in my opinion, the best quarterback in the NFC. They've got, obviously, one of the better head coaches in the NFC. Listen, man, the Rams won 10 games last year, and they shouldn't have been anywhere close to that. I know they lost Aaron Donald, but I still think that they've added way more talent than what they let go out the building. And when you can run the ball and you can add in some beef like Jonah Jackson to that offensive line, I think that offense is going to be a freaking handful this year. They can control the clock. They can score with you if you want to go the shootout option. Cooper Kupp wasn't healthy for a big majority of last year. If he's healthy this year, man, watch out. I think the Rams can be a really, really big threat to the 49ers in the NFC West. I've got them at number 6.
And I could see that because like, they have the roster. For me, it was more so losing one of the best players to ever play the game, all pro,
For sure.
Hall of Fame kind of guy. For me, was like, damn, I can't have them that high. Because if not, I would have probably had them right where the Packers are, and I would have just bumped everyone else down. But Aaron Donald just being such a great player, I was like, there's no way I could have them that high. Who do you have? Because now we're at 5, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, we're at 5. Who do you have at 5? I'll let you
I
go
have the
before I go.
49ers. I have the
Okay.
49ers at number 5. Obviously, we know the biggest departure is Eric Armstead. The biggest addition in free agency is Leonard Floyd. We know the draft picks, Ricky Pearsall, Renardo Green, Malik Mustafa. I think the 49ers, the names changed. I don't know that they got a lot better. Now, they don't have to get a lot better, right? They were this close to winning a Super Bowl. But I also think that last year was arguably the most down that the league has been in many, many, many years. I can't remember a league being more wide open for one particular team than it was for the San Francisco 49ers last year. The NFC was absolute dog water for majority of the year. They struggled with Green Bay and Detroit way more than I thought that they should have in those playoff games. I thought they were the clear better team and should have been. They were the experienced team and the better team. Yet both those games came down to the wire. I don't understand it. And then you had the way better roster than Kansas City, yet you still couldn't figure out a way to get it done. And now you're looking at all these teams, and it's like, well, you stayed roughly the same. The names changed. You stayed roughly the same, and everybody else around you is taking major leaps forward. It's really hard for me to put them any higher than number 5 at this point. So right now I've got the San Francisco 49ers at number 5. Who do you have at number
That's
5?
very interesting because my number 5 and my number 4, I'm going to think of them both together because when I was doing this, it was very, very hard for these two picks. And the only reason why I went with one over the other, and I'll explain that right now. So I went with the Lions at number 5. And I had the 49ers at 4. I think the Lions have gone much, much better, adding Terrion Arnold. They added interior line, Makai Wingo, who should be getting a rotational role with their team. But for me, they added a lot of secondary, and that's what their team lacked. So for me, I had them at 5 only because, and I know I'm not sold on Brock Purdy or anything, but because of the quarterback situation. I think Jared Goff is the worst quarterback on a contending team. Like it just, for me,
Yeah.
that's just why I had him at 5 and not 4, because I was close to having the Lions at 4. Ended up putting the Lions at 5, Niners at 4 because of the quarterback situation. But like you said, Niners were close to losing to the Lions. The Niners didn't get better. Truthfully, if you don't get better, you get worse because everyone else around you is getting better. So essentially, the Niners did, in a way, get worse because everyone around them got better. So that's where the Lions could. How much better did you get? Can you finally knock off the Niners? You were up a lot of points, like was 17 in the NFC Championship game. So things could change in one offseason. The Niners didn't really add much. It's can everyone stay healthy for another year? Can things go your way? And I don't know. I mean, the Niners at 4 for me and Lions at 5. That's where I'm at right now. And it's because of the quarterback situation. I know a lot of people hearing that are going to be like, what the hell? Marco has them at 4 because of Brock Purdy. And they know I'm not huge on Brock Purdy yet. I want another year of consistent play from him to give him that stamp of approval.
Yeah, and that's totally fair. I was back and forth as well. That was my 5-4 team, was Detroit and the 49ers. I put the Lions ahead of the 49ers though. So the players they lost were Chauncey Gardner-Johnson and Jonah Jackson, which I talked about how big of an addition Jonah Jackson is to the Rams offensive line. But they replaced Jonah Jackson with Kevin Zeitler, who's a Pro Bowl guard in his own right. So you went from one really good guard to another really good guard. So that's no drop off. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, I definitely think losing him can hurt, but he didn't play a majority of last year. He came back and was kind of a shell of himself for the playoffs. He was just a name. In fact, a big majority of those snaps, he wasn't even playing in the playoffs. So you go and get Carlton Davis, you trade for him, you add DJ Reader, which if anybody is unsure who DJ Reader is and what he brings to the game, go watch the Bengals game last year for the 49ers and look at how he messed everything up the middle. That game right there, single-handedly, and what he did to the 49ers interior offensive line single-handedly makes me want to replace every single one of them. Left guard, center, right guard. That's how much he wrecked the game for the San Francisco 49ers by himself last year. Now he's on Detroit. And then not only did they go get Carlton Davis because they need help in the secondary, they draft Terrion Arnold, they draft Ennis Rakestraw, and then they get Mekhi Wingo late in the draft as well. They absolutely improved their defense. Their offense shouldn't be any worse for the wear. They didn't lose Ben Johnson. If they would have lost Ben Johnson, I would have easily kicked them behind the 49ers. But in a shocker, he stayed. That offense is going to be every bit as good as what it was last year. That defense was a major, major weakness for them. I don't think that defense is a weakness any longer. I think that defense is very formidable, and I expect them to take a big step forward. So I have the Detroit Lions at number 4 ahead of the San Francisco 49ers, who I have at number 5.
And I'm telling you, if it wasn't for Jared Goff, they would have been ahead of the Niners for me. It just for me, I just don't trust Jared Goff. And outside of that, it's like, hey, I respect Brock Purdy more. And it's not saying you don't respect Brock Purdy, but I'm just saying for me, out of those two. But who's your number 3?
Listen. Here's the deal. I am not a big Jared Goff guy either, but Jared Goff, for whatever reason, they were still able to make it to the NFC Championship last year with Jared Goff. He has played in a Super Bowl. He has made some Pro Bowls. Again, I don't think he's near as good as what the pure numbers say. You get him off his spot, it can be a major problem, but that's why the Bills and why he works so well with the Bills. They've just got a stone wall right in front of him. It's almost impossible to get him off his spot on a consistent basis. Now, you see a random time where the Ravens were able to do it for a big majority of the game last year, and it was a disaster. But 99% of the teams in the league don't have the firepower to send it that elite offensive line to get him off of his spot. And so it makes it really, really hard. By the way, they got Christian Mahogany as well, who might be a plug-and-play guy. Like that offensive line that was already great, bro, they went and drafted another guy that would start on a lot of teams in the league, and he might be the first guy off the bench. So point is, it's great. But we also know, for as much as we don't like Jared Goff, and I agree with you, if you don't get him off his spot and he can camp, he can tear you apart. And that's what makes it hard is like, man, you really gotta get to him. And that means you got to get through that offensive line to get to him. And I don't trust very many teams to do that. I just don't.
And there's a likelihood that what's the receiver opposite of Jameson Williams takes a step up because he's recovered from the ACL. So there's a good chance that we do see an explosive offense with Amon-Ra on one side, Jameson Williams on the other. So very interesting. I'm kind of glad you gave them the respect that they deserve, to be honest.
Well, remember this, though, too. The 49ers last year, when they played them in the NFC Championship, Jonah Jackson didn't play in that game at all. So they lost Jonah Jackson, but they replaced him with another Pro Bowl guard. So that was without one of their really good offensive linemen. The 49ers still couldn't consistently get to him. And on top of that, their all-world tight end was a shell of himself, man. He had a knee brace on. He really shouldn't have been playing, but he was toughing through it. So that's 2 big-time players that were really hampered or didn't even play last year. Now, again, that could easily happen again this year. We don't know what injuries are going to look like, but that team that I thought was already undermanned against the 49ers from a talent aspect had 2 of their better players either compromised or out of that game, which should have made that talent gap even more astronomical. Yet somehow, man, they were able to hang in that game. So now I look at them and say, listen, player for player, they're there now. They're there. So if they were able to hang when they weren't there player for player, what would happen if they were? And that's what I can't erase that out of my mind until I see them play. Now, they do play this year. They play at Levi. I think it's possible the 49ers just might mop them, and maybe that's the case, and then I'll be super happy about it. But right now, roster for roster and knowing what it is, I got to put the Lions.
I mean, if you don't want to go on the road to Detroit, there's a good chance you have to win that game.
You're going to have to win that game.
Yeah, you have to win that game if you don't want to go on the road. So
absolutely. All right, now we're into the top 3. I'm really curious to see how you have this because there's a team
That hasn't been announced. It hasn't been.
That
I know
has
exactly what team we're talking about too.
that has not been brought up yet. And all of a sudden, it looks like we've both got them in the top 3. It's just where do they fall? Do you want to go at number 3 first, or do you want me to
Yeah,
go?
I'll go 3. I have the Texans
Okay.
at 3, and you probably do too. Or you
I
might even have them
don't.
higher.
I
Damn,
do.
that's crazy. So for
I
me,
do.
when I look at the Texans, man, how do they get better? They added Stephon Diggs, right? But not only did they just add Stephon Diggs, they added Joe Mixon. The Texans are a legit team, man. Like, but
Yeah.
for me, it's not even the additions of those two guys. It's the addition of CJ Stroud, right? And what do I mean by that? I mean, he's only going to get better, man. Like truthfully, he knows what he needs to do to win games. Tank Dow's going to come back. Nico Collins is going to come back healthier. These two dudes, like that is a major blow not having Tank Dow in the playoffs. That opens up your offense. So for me, looking at them, we saw D'Amico Ryans what he could do with an elite defense. Their defense only got better. When you look at some of their draft picks that they picked up, I'm expecting some of them to play earlier than people were anticipating. He picked up, I believe, Kalen Bullock, who me and you are both were like, hey, that's a good deep free safety. Kamari
So mad
Lassiter.
when they did that. Yep.
So like they drafted really well. They got another tight end to go with TJ Stroud. What's his name? Cade Stover. So it's like looking at that, man, like they truly got better. And for me, it's CJ Stroud is. I remember I was on last show last year. I think it was during the playoffs. I had CJ Stroud ranked higher than most people were expecting. They're like, holy shit. And why? He's a damn good quarterback. Look what in the playoffs, he played damn well. People will say what they want about CJ Stroud in the playoffs. They're like, oh, he choked, man. 109.3 passer rating, 449 yards and 3 touchdowns. And 2 of his
They had
his
so
first
many
2 playoff
drops,
career
dude.
games.
They had so many drops in that second game against the Ravens, too, man.
Like it's just crazy with what he did his first year, man. I'm excited to see him keep progressing, and whoever some big contract needs to give him his own podcast already, because him on a podcast
The
where he's
guy's
actually
hilarious. He's so funny.
He's fun. Not only funny, he brings great football analysis. Like he actually talks about the game and he respects the game. Versus, like, I thought it was great when he shut up Micah Parsons.
Well, no. Here's the thing: is he's funny, but it's unintentionally funny. He's serious. He's very serious. He's not trying to be funny, but he takes the craft so seriously. And when he's on there with a personality like Parsons, he's hilarious because he's dead serious. He's like, you don't know what you're talking about. You're an idiot, which is hilarious. He's very serious, but it's also comedic relief because he's just genuinely that intense with it. I love it. Yeah, he does need a podcast.
He's serious business at all times when it's talking football with him, and that's my favorite part about CJ Stroud. Football is business for the guy.
Yeah, absolutely. Brother Bob says we have Kyle Levy, so we are number 1 regardless of no Super Bowl. All right. Dazza says a lot of 49ers fans seem to be optimistic about our chances this year. However, we barely beat the Packers and Lions. Rams narrowly lost to the Lions, and yet they all got better while we stagnated. Yeah, I mean, I think this, a lot of 49er fans have this thought that the 49ers are just going to waltz right back to the Super Bowl. And I just don't see it that way, man. I really don't. I think if they made it to a Super Bowl this year, and especially if they win it, that they overachieved a little bit based off of where I have them in the preseason. So not big time. They're still one of the better teams in the league, right? I'm not calling them garbage. I just had them at number 5, but when I think you're the 5th best team going into it, last year I thought they were the best team. This year, if I think you're the 5th best team, at least roster-wise, I had them going to the Super Bowl and losing to the Bengals. So, but ultimately I had them going to the Super Bowl and losing. They went that far. This year I don't have that. I had them as a 12-win team last year as well. And I had them as a 12-win team going to the Super Bowl and losing. That's exactly what they were. They were a 12-win team that went to the Super Bowl and lost. So I feel like I had a good feeling on it last year. I'm going to double down. I don't think they make it back to a Super Bowl. In fact, I wouldn't be shocked if they lost in the divisional this year. So
for me,
right,
I'm going to agree with you here because I said the Niners wouldn't win a Super Bowl with Brock Purdy last year in his first true year starting. I don't think they get back to the Super Bowl. I don't think they have the roster, and then the Super Bowl hangover is real, man.
It is real, but also they were blessed with health last year at a rate that we've never seen with this team. We haven't seen anything close to that in 10 years, and they were so healthy last year compared to what they have been. I don't know that you can have a team that is aging in very important aspects of it and expect that to duplicate itself. So I think it's impossible to predict injuries. Obviously, we're not rooting for anybody to get injured, but you have to be realistic about it. And injuries are a big part of the game. And the 49ers don't have depth in key areas, I think, along the defensive line or the offensive line where they can absorb a major injury to a key player there. And if that happens, their season's done, period. So,
Absolutely.
number 3, I have the Baltimore Ravens. They lost Patrick Queen and Kevin Zeitler. Their biggest addition was Derrick Henry. They drafted Nate Wiggins, Roger Rosengarten, and Adisa Isaac. So I think they had a really good draft. They also have some really young players that I think are going to fill in well for the players that they lost, the big name players that they lost. But still, they're young players that are unproven, and they've got to go and prove it. But the Ravens are just always there, man. They're always there. As long as Lamar Jackson's healthy, they're always going to be in the mix. We know what they bring to the table. They're going to be a tough-nosed team that punches you in the mouth. Now they just went and added to it with Derrick Henry. So the way that I look at it is Zay Flowers in year 2, I think is going to take a major step forward. That secondary was already elite. I think they somehow improved it this offseason. They're just a really good team. They're a really well-run franchise. And I don't think they're quite as good as what they were last year. I mean, they were absolutely dominant defensively. I still think that they are arguably top 2 defense in the league. I don't think they'll be quite as dominant, and that's why I have them at number 3, but they're still a very, very good team. Baltimore at number 3. So I assume you've got the Ravens at number 2, right?
I do have the Ravens at number 2. When you look at
Okay.
them, I thought my favorite pick from the Ravens was Rasheen Ali, even though I was super high on Rosengarten and Nate Wiggins. I think he's the perfect back to complement Derrick Henry. Just Derrick Henry in general is a huge addition to them because they didn't really have a stable running back core last year. So
And also let's not forget the kid that was super speedy last year that
Mitchell
changed their whole offense. Mitchell changed their whole offense. He'll be back this year. And if he can come back and be the same player he was athletically, he brings something super. When they lost him, man, that offense for about 3 weeks turned into all of a sudden the most dynamic offense in the league. And as soon as they lost him and went back to more of, all right, we're playing it safe. We're going to win with our defense. And hopefully our offense can kind of hang in there and do what it needs to do. But man, he brought a change of pace to that team. So you're right. They drafted one, and then they've got him coming back. Plus they have Derrick Henry. And by the way, you got Lamar Jackson. I mean, dude, they're going to run the hell out of the ball like they always do. But I think they're going to be more explosive than they've been in the past doing so.
And what's crazy is they got a starting right tackle in the second round at pick 62, just chilling there, getting Roger Rosengarten to start at right tackle where that's his best position. Like, man, Adisa Isaac was a really good pick. That Adisa Isaac was a Raven. Like, when you watch him coming out of Penn State, everyone talked about Chop Robinson and everything like that. I saw Adisa Isaac and I was like, man, if he goes to the Ravens, he's going to have a really good career there. I'm excited to see what they do. I truly think their biggest issue is, can they stay healthy? They're the last couple of years, they can't stay healthy. And if they can stay healthy, they'll be fine. Their defense is really good. Losing a defensive coordinator should affect them defensively, but I don't, with the roster they have, I think they're at number 2 for me.
Yeah, I mean, very, very good team. I forgot, losing McDonald also, but it seems like they turn out the best defensive coaches all the time. It's like just plug and play for them. They're going to be great on defense. Like, how many guys have they gotten hired over the years that were their defensive guys? But it's like, bro, the system's in place, man. The Raven way is in place, and they just plug and play. So, yep, that's I've got the Ravens at 3. You've got them at 2. You have the Texans at 3. I've got the Texans at 2. Much to what you said, the biggest losses they had were Jonathan Grenard and Blake Cashman. But I think they upgraded in both areas, bringing in Daniil Hunter and Azeez Al-Shaair. Obviously, Joe Mixon, Stephon Diggs. drafting Blake Fisher, Kalen Bullocks, who, oh my gosh, I wish the 49ers would have got him. Kamari Lassiter. We talk about one Ricky Purcell. Kamari Lassiter put the straps on him, shut him all the way out last year in college. So, they got him in round 2. They upgraded in a major way. And again, it comes down to CJ Stroud as well. I think we are entering an era where CJ Stroud is going to be a lead in this league and he's going to be there for a long time. I can't say he's there yet because I got to see it for at least another year before.
He's there.
But listen, the thing is that he was a top tier talent coming out of college, right? And when top tier talents, guys that you expect to be elite in the NFL, show that very early, as long as they don't take a major back step in year 2, then you pretty much can count on them really being that guy. Most players, I still like to see it 3 years. There's some crazy things that happen in year 3 for some of these players as well. So I'm not going to say, hey, he's for sure there. He's for sure going to be there forever. But if he improves on what he did last year, I thought he was, with some of the injuries, a top 3 quarterback in the league. And I think that he very well could duplicate that again this year. I mean, he's that deal. He's really that freaking good, man. He's got everything you could look for. He's got just enough athleticism. He's got an absolute rocket for an arm. His accuracy, I mean, he to me, we talk about accuracy. Drew Brees, the most accurate quarterback of all time. Steve Young's right up there. I think CJ Stroud certainly could be in that conversation when it's all said and done. He's that deadly accurate. And one thing that he has that neither of those guys had is he has an arm that neither of them had. Now, Steve Young's arm was just fine. He, wasn't weak. But Drew Brees, he was lacking in that area. That was like his one major weakness. That is not the case for CJ Stroud. So he's the rare where it's like you've got elite accuracy and you've got the arm strength to boot. Plus the decision making is about as good as it can be for a rookie. I mean, dude, I can't say enough good things about CJ Stroud. He's got all the measurables athletically. He's really freaking good, man. He's really good. And I had him as the clear best quarterback coming out last year. I think you did too. But not even I could have imagined that it would look that good that early. So,
and what's crazy about CJ Stroud is, and I always come back to that S2 score, right? How everyone were like, "Oh, he's terrible," blah blah blah. Mm-hmm. S2 score this, S2 score that. But the funniest part is, for the quarterback position, he was extremely high on the 3 measurables that the quarterbacks need to test well on, and he was extremely high on each of those. So it's like, well, you guys are looking at the big score. Give me the 3 levels that a quarterback needs to be good on. He did very great at those. I knew he was going to be a good quarterback. The fact that he has an offense that dropped a lot of passes, I think Stephon Diggs should help that. I think Tank Dell recovering, Nico Collins on the rise. Man, that for me, I'm very excited to see CJ Stroud, and I'm willing to say he's in that elite category already. Like, just from what I saw last year, they're the little things you don't see rookies do.
No, I agree.
That was where I was like, yeah, he's ahead of the curve by far.
Yeah, and it's nothing against CJ Stroud. I just have that 3-year rule where I really, you know what I mean? Like, just give me the 3 years. Because we've seen it, though. We have seen it. And I don't expect him to drop off. Again, he came into the league as a top-tier talent. All he did was show that he's exactly that. So I think, like, it's less likely for a guy who comes into the league as a top-tier talent, proves they're a top-tier talent, to all of a sudden just fall off. Like, if you've been top-tier talent your whole life, you were like the man in high school. You were the man in college. Then you come in year 1 in the NFL and you're the man again. Likelihood of you dropping off, pretty slim. But, you've seen it where guys weren't necessarily the man, or they were the man, then they took a dip and then they rose up again, and some inconsistency. And so you really got to see it. But with him, I doubt that it drops off. I still want to see it for multiple years. But he's, dude. And one thing I did say, I've got a tweet out there before he was drafted and said, not only is he the best quarterback in this league, in this draft by a wide margin, but he's Kyle Shanahan's dream quarterback. Well, guess what? Guess what? He's in that same system, and we saw exactly what it could look like from a young man he is him and Kyle Shanahan would be, bro.
But
I
I think
can't even imagine what it would look like.
the most important thing for CJ Stroud is coming in and taking care of the ball. 5 interceptions on the year in the regular season. Like that was huge. Like you don't see rookie quarterbacks come in and when they're throwing 500 times and only throw 5 interceptions. Like that's normally you see a higher number in terms of
And he
interceptions
had
from
a
a
3
rookie
interception
quarterback.
game, didn't he? Didn't he have a 3
He might
interception
have.
game? I want to say he had a 3 interception game. So really, you remove one game from him, and he had 2 interceptions in the other 14. I think he played in, or 13, because I think he
He
did
did.
miss a
He
game as
did.
well.
He did have a 3 interception game against Arizona,
Yeah.
and they still won.
Yeah. So yeah, that was the crazy one where, dude, I remember. In fact, I remember exactly the scenario in that game, how they won at the very end. I thought Arizona won. I got up, went and helped my son with something, and came back and was like, the Texans just won? How did that happen? Like, that happened so fast. I don't know how they scored. But yeah, so I think he played 15 games last year. So in 14 games, he threw 2 interceptions as a rookie. Dude. Yeah, he's incredible. He's incredible. All right, we both agree the Chiefs are number 1, right? You got to knock them off as long as
Oh, yeah,
Patrick Mahomes is there.
but not even that. Like so, with Patrick Mahomes, right? They're elite. Their interior offensive line is elite. They drafted Xavier Worthy, who should provide extra explosive ability to their offense. They got Marquise Brown. Defensively, they brought everyone back except their corner. What's his name?
L'Jarius Sneed.
L'Jarius Sneed, who it doesn't matter. They have Trent McDuffie, who could play outside. They have Jalen Watson, who was good for them.
Can I say this?
Years ago.
And I don't even know his name. But they had a corner that was injured last year that they thought was their best corner on the team, believe it or not. And he missed all of last year. It might have, I don't know who it was, but there was somebody that was on IR, and I was reading something how they think he might be the best corner on their roster, which is absolutely insane if that is the case.
Well, it wasn't Joshua Williams, was it?
I don't know. I don't remember his name. If you said it, it's not going to ring familiar. I think it might have been a rookie or a second-year player that just didn't play at all last year. He had an injury.
Yeah, it might have been Joshua Williams because I believe he was the guy they were really high on. But he played he's played for 2 years out of I believe it was like a small school like Lafayette or something, really small school.
Yeah.
I don't think he played much last year. If he played 2 games, maybe started 2 of them.
Yeah.
Could be wrong.
So it might be him, but all I know is there was a reason that they were just willing to let L'Jarius Sneed walk, and it sounds like they have the corner in the building, they believe, to replace him right away, so they don't feel like there's going to be a drop off there. And then you're right. I mean, weapon wise, dude. And then they got Kingsley in round 2. They got your other guy, Jaden Hicks, in the secondary. Like, yeah, man, they added to this team. I think roster for roster, they're better than they were last year. And you've still got Patrick Mahomes and all the things in place that you need with Andy Reid. They've got to be number 1 until proven otherwise at this point.
And the cool thing is Kingsley doesn't have to go over there and start. They drafted a tackle in Wanya Morris last year in like the 4th or 5th round, so they could let Kingsley, hey, you know what, I want you to be our future left tackle. Get all these reps. We're gonna prep you for left tackle next year. When I believe what's the dude they have on over there right now to get Jawan Taylor. When's Jawan Taylor's contract
Jawan
up?
Taylor, I think he played right last year. They had what's his name from Smith? What is it, Donovan Smith? Yeah, he's gone. So I think though.
Losing him is an addition though, because he wasn't good at all.
Yeah, he's awful. He's terrible. Yeah.
And then, so I definitely like it. They're the team to beat, man. Like they're great defensive coordinator. I think the best defensive coordinator in the NFL, best offensive coordinator in the NFL, best quarterback. Like, truthfully, how can you not have them at 1? And if you don't have them at 1, you're lying to yourself. Like, it's okay to be honest and put them at 1.
You really don't think Purdy's better than CJ Stroud, do you? Like, that's a serious question. Please tell me that you don't believe that's the case. Daza says, aside from a massive regression, is there anything that stops the Niners from giving Brock Purdy a massive contract? No.
You say no? So you think they're guaranteed to give him a contract, like a massive contract?
He said, aside from a massive, like a regression. which is obvious, right? If he regresses, of course. No, I don't think there's anything other than that would stop it. Injury, I guess. If he got injured again, then but I would put that under regression, right? Like if he's just not on the field again after coming off of a major injury. No,
drastic trade. So you're telling me, all right, next year, the number 1 overall team offers you 3 1s, and you're getting the first overall pick for Brock Purdy. And this is hypothetical because it's anything aside from a massive injury. So
I think the Niners would do that, but I just don't think. I don't think there's a team in the league that would do that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think there's team. I know that like fans love to look at Brock Purdy as like, oh, he's the man. Like, I'm sorry. If you put Justin Herbert, who's getting paid massive money, if you would put him on the trade block during the draft, he's going to command 3 1s. You put Brock Purdy on the trade block during the draft, and that was with 2 years of eligibility being cheap, he's not commanding anything close to that. So, no, there's no way that anybody's giving up 3 1s for Brock Purdy. It's just not going to happen.
And I agree with you, but if he does something crazy or puts up great numbers and someone does offer you those 3 1s, I personally think Kyle would do it. Like, you're going to reset at the quarterback market. Your cap numbers are going to drop again. You could get a guy like Shedeur Sanders who could come in and probably be that guy for you. But I don't think fans need to understand, man, like the quarterback position, if you play the quarterback position within your offense, you're going to look good, right? Like fans hate on Jared Goff, like including myself. He's not a top quarterback in the league. Like in fans, Brock Purdy is closer to Jared Goff than people want to give him credit for. Like truthfully, and it's okay to admit because you could win without an elite quarterback. It's been proven. The Lions got far in the playoffs. Brock Purdy led the Niners to Super Bowl. Damn, Jimmy Garoppolo led us to a damn Super Bowl. Whether you want to put, hey, he only threw 8 times in a game. He was still the damn quarterback that entire year, and they won on a run. So either way, as long as you're a decent quarterback in the Kyle's offense, you could win a lot of games and get to the Super Bowl. What for me, it's not about can we get to the Super Bowl with Brock. It's can you win a Super Bowl with Brock? And the answer, in my opinion, is no. I don't think you can. And I think at that point is when do you have to figure that out after you pay him $60 million and you don't have anyone else on the roster where he's having to carry the rest of the load. And I think that could be a major, major disappointment for Niner fans.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. I just had to make sure that like we were on the same page. Here, here's what's funny though, 187, and I brought this up the other day. The perception of clutch, right, is so the 49ers lost to the Chiefs. They were going to lose to the Chiefs no matter what. If you had just simply swapped conferences and had the Chiefs and the Lions in opposite conferences, the Ravens would have made it to the Super Bowl. The whole Lamar's a choke artist thing wouldn't even exist because all of a sudden he made it to a Super Bowl. And the 49ers would have lost to the Chiefs and wouldn't have made it to a Super Bowl. And it would have been like, well, they made it further with Jimmy Garoppolo, right? Like they both lost to the same team. One just has to play them on the way to the Super Bowl. The other one has the luxury of not playing them until they make the Super Bowl. So it's funny how perception can change just because you made it further. But ultimately, they both lost to the same team, and they would have both lost to the same team if you would just switch the games around and said, hey, now all of a sudden the 49ers got to play the Chiefs to get to the Super Bowl. They wouldn't have made it. The Ravens would have. They would have lost to them in the Super Bowl. And then what? You know what I mean? So it's, I don't know, that whole thing where it's like, oh, well, we made it to the Super Bowl and they didn't, so we're better. It's like, pump the brakes a little bit. You lost to the same team. And if you didn't have the luxury of waiting till the Super Bowl to play them, you wouldn't have made it to the Super Bowl either. So I don't know. That thing's always. I'm
not gonna lie. I do want to see Lamar get better in the playoffs, though. I do want to see.
No, I agree. No, 100%, 100% agree with that. I'm just saying it's funny how perception could change if you just swap the Lions and the Chiefs, put them in different conferences for that one game. The result would have been the Ravens versus the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. The 49ers wouldn't have made it. People would have been in an uproar because Brock Purdy couldn't get him as far as Jimmy Garoppolo. And then the whole Lamar can't get it done. the narrative changes a little bit because all of a sudden he made it to a Super Bowl. You know what I mean? It's
No, yeah,
all you got to
absolutely. I
do
get
is
what you're saying.
flip flop one team, and the results are vastly different, and the perception is different because the perception again, and I've had this conversation a million times. The perception of Josh Allen is he's a turnover machine and he doesn't get it done in the playoffs. Well, the reality of Josh Allen is you go look at him in the playoffs, he protects the ball as good or better than anybody. He doesn't turn the ball over at all in the playoffs, right? Which is when it matters most. And the way you look at Brock Purdy is he wasn't the reason that the 49ers lost the Super Bowl, which I completely agree with. He was not the reason. He also didn't go win the game, though, either. Josh Allen, with 13 seconds left, scored a touchdown, not a field goal, a touchdown after starting the playoffs with 9 touchdowns and 0 interceptions over 2 games on the road against the Chiefs, have the lead, 13 seconds left, scores a touchdown. All you got to do is not allow them to get in field goal range. Well, guess what? The overtime rule was different then. They got in field goal range. They kicked the field goal. They win the coin toss. Josh Allen never touches the ball again. And now all of a sudden, Josh Allen's like, oh, he can't get it done. Dude, what more could he have done? He threw 4 fucking touchdown passes, including the game winner, and never got to touch the ball again. What was he supposed to do? What more could he have done? But Josh Allen can't get it done. Like, come on, man. It's like people, I know that people aren't not watching these games, but because he's not a 49er, it's like, oh, we got to find a way to throw shade because, you know, the narrative says he does this and that. And it's like, no, that's not the reality, though. Go watch the actual games and you'll know. Just like anybody, I guarantee there are a bunch of people on the internet that are like, yeah, Brock Purdy took him as far as Jimmy Garoppolo and he couldn't get it done and neither could Jimmy. They're the same guy. How much does that piss you off as a fan to hear that? You're like, dude, did you even watch the Super Bowl? Like, he did way more for this team on the way to the Super Bowl and in the Super Bowl than Jimmy Garoppolo. He is not the reason they lost the game. You should feel that way. That's the absolute truth. But then you can't go over the top and say, oh, Josh Allen can't get it done. He's a turnover machine. Well, he doesn't turn it over in the playoffs. Yeah, but he doesn't win the big game. Yeah, but he gave them a lead off of a touchdown on the road with 13 seconds left and never touched the ball again. What more could he have done? So if you look at Brock Purdy and say, hey, he's not the reason they lost, then you've got to apply that same rule to other players and stop just blanket looking at the stats, looking at who won or lost and coming up with an opinion because it makes you sound stupid. So that's it.
But I mean, if you, I mean, you're right though, because if you put Brock on other teams, right, how far does he take them? And how do you look at Brock on another team, right? Putting him on the Texans. Are the Texans a playoff team? No. CJ Stroud on the Niners, they win the Super Bowl. Like, that's how I kind of see it. Like, because you could move quarterbacks around on any team, and the offense is going to change, play style is going to change. And a lot of people like to be like, oh, well, Brock's done stuff that no Niner quarterback has done with since Kyle Shanahan's been here.
No, 187 here. That is funny though. He has that trash can, which is really funny. That's the funniest trash can in the world. 187. Most people in here don't know what we're talking about, but a lot of people. This is the other funny thing, right? A lot of people know, and people aren't saying he's trash. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not trying to go that far, but people question him, right? As worst case scenario, you have him as a top 5 guy, bona fide top 5 guy. Most people have him at number 2. All right. But people question him and then have the nerve to say, I mean, how can you question Brock Purdy? He did everything that he's supposed to do. It's like Josh Allen hasn't, but you question him. Make that make sense. So I don't know. It's just weird. The whole thing's weird. Anyways, that's it for us this evening. Went a little bit longer than I knew. That top 10 could take a while, right? We had to talk through that. That's why we didn't do 5 topics like normal. I appreciate all of you in the chat, even the ones that aren't so smart. You know who you are. No, I'm just joking. If you think Josh Allen's trash, then I'm going to put you in that category. But other than that, you're pretty smart. I'm sure of it. Appreciate each and every one of you. Much love. I hope you all have a great weekend. Thank you so much, as always, for tapping in. Couldn't do it without y'all. Much love. Peace. Oh, hold on. I think we have a couple super chat. Okay. I don't miss these. Joey Mellon says, my night was ruined without the 49ers after dark. I'm sorry, dude. The bathroom. I had to finish the bathroom. Okay. PDX Niner says, I would keep Brock, but it's a gut feeling for me. Yeah. I mean, I think when you know, right? And there's something to that. There is something to that where I don't know how to explain it, but when you know. When a player's great, you just know. And right now, I look at Brock Purdy, who had a phenomenal season. I don't look at him and put him in the category of those other guys. I just don't. Like, I don't look at him and get that feeling that he's that guy. Not yet, anyways. Maybe that'll change, but as of right now, I'm not there yet. We'll see how it goes over the next couple of years. That being said, much love. Peace.
Peace.